Totally Football Show, European edition. Today, Italy, Napoli and Inter take it to the wire. Germany, Dortmund hit the Holstein, while there's bitter pills for Leipzig. We get news from France, where there's a mixed night, Chez Lacazette, and Portugal too. We hear about Real Madrid's rebuild and the Eredivisie, where a big bottle of Ajax helps PSV clear up. All that plus the continent counts down to Wednesday's big game, El Clasico, in this Totally Football Show. Hello there, listeners. Tuesday, May 20th, I think. Certainly is for me here in Sacramento, California. All right. Over there in more relevant areas of the world are James Horncastle. All right, James.
Hi, James.
And also Julien Laurence.
Hello, boys.
Jules, what's it say behind you? I love you in French.
Yeah, for you, my brothers. And for all the listeners that can't see but can listen.
All right. Say it, Jules.
I love you, but in French.
No, I mean, I love you in French.
You say, say it in French. Oh, je t'aime.
Wow. There you go, listeners. There you go. That's my moment of the week. Speaking of which, what's yours, James Horncastle?
I think the farewell, not for the first time, that the Roma crowd has given Claudio Ranieri, because they reserved for him a choreography that they usually only reserve for Lazio fans, although this was one of affection rather than disaffection. And considering that Ranieri has never won the league with Roma, unlike, let's say, Fabio Capello, Niels Liedholm, I think he is perhaps the Roma coach that Roma fans have loved the most. And he was very tearful at the end. He basically took the microphone, went and stood sort of around the penalty area facing the Curva Sud, addressed his fellow people with his grandkids with him, and said, I think it was 60 years ago. It can't be 70 years ago, but it was like 60 years ago, I was stood there with you and I asked you to help me, and you did help me, but there's still one game to go. And, Roma still have a shot of qualifying for the Champions League, which they haven't done in a long, long time. And who would have said that when they'd sacked De Rossi, sacked Ivan Juric, and were closer to the relegation zone than they were to the top four? It really goes to show what an incredible job Ranieri has done.
One of the many great stories in Serie A this weekend. We'll touch on some of the others later on. Julien, though, what's been your moment of the weekend?
It was an incredible last day in Ligue 1, but really has to go to Alexandre Lacazette for his last ever game for Lyon. He's out of contract. He will move to another club in the summer. He played his 392nd game for the club, where he started, obviously, went through the academy. He was born and bred in Lyon, then spent 5 years at Arsenal, came back, 392 games, and he was on 199 for the amount of goals, so 199 goals scored so far. So everybody was hoping that he would do and finally score the 200th one, and he scored a brace, actually a penalty first after missing a couple of chances, then a second goal given to him by Ryan Cherki to make it 200 and 201 in his Lyon career, which is incredible. He's a club legend, one of the greatest clubs in their history, only the second player in their history to have reached 200 goals or more with Fleury Dinalo in the 60s and 70s. So incredible achievement in itself. Then they had a big party and celebration for him. Everybody stayed in the stadium. He had his 3 children and his wife with him. A lot of people. He gave an interview to French television after the game, and then Ryan Cherki's mum hijacked the interview to ask him for a selfie with her. They were on the pitch. It was great and really emotional. He cried obviously a lot. He looked like he was crying before the game as he came out onto the pitch, then after for sure, trying not to cry. And then he got home to discover that people had burglared his house. So not the end of the evening that he wanted, obviously, but before that, up to the breaking into his house, it was pretty much perfect.
That's sad, isn't it?
I mean, who does this?
That's what they're trying to find out, I guess. But
yeah.
Yeah. In this show, we'll be hearing very shortly from Paul Balouz, also Michiel Jongsma on the incredible Ajax story this weekend, Seb Staffabloor later on. And we should also touch on the start of the cup final season in Europe. Wednesday, of course, it is the Europa League final. A chance now with our Euro expert to find out a little bit more about these two exciting and exotic contenders, Spurs and Man United. Who have you got, Jules?
Who's the worst between the two worst teams to not be relegated in the Premier League this season? It's a tough call, really. I don't think we should expect a great final either. I think considering the injuries that Spurs are having right now, and the fact that even if they beat United 3 times already this year, twice in the league and in the League Cup too, I don't know why, but I would give a slight advantage to United somehow, also because I think there's probably more pedigree, not so much with that squad, but some of those players, some of those leaders have kind of been there a little bit before. And it's maybe a bit more in their culture to be there and know how to deal with all the expectations, the pressure, the occasion, maybe more than Spurs, really. So just for that, I would give it to them, but I just don't think there's much really between two dreadful teams.
Do you know that West Ham are the lowest placed team from any nation ever to win a European trophy? They were 14th when they claimed the Conference League in 2023. So that's one piece of history that's going to be made on Wednesday night, James.
Yeah, glorious. Very much the best league in the world, offering its elite best of the best.
Well, they beat the European sides.
Well, I mean, it just goes to show that, playing on all of these fronts is extremely difficult. That's what we've learned from this season. And I will be amazed to see what Ruben Amorim's press conference would be, where he would have to almost be positive about his team if they win. Is he capable of doing that? I'm still not so sure. He seems to just love sort of criticizing and kind of outlining all of the shortcomings of this team, who we are now all convinced don't have a squad to compete in the Champions League, even if they get there, which, I find ludicrous given the amount of money that they've spent and the actual quality of player Man United have got. I think that's still an absolute ludicrous argument that they somehow don't think they could compete in the Champions League, a Champions League that this year had, shall we name some of the teams that were in the kind of, in the league phase? Do we really think Spurs and Man United don't have squads to compete in the Champions League? I think it's just a mad narrative that we're all telling each other. I would really like, I think I'd really like Ange to win this. And that's despite his sort of, some of his quite shameful press conferences after defeats this year, mate. But the idea that you basically core what you're going to do, say, I always win trophies in my second season. If he does that, full credit to him.
Yeah.
If he then not only delivers a trophy for Spurs, which they haven't had in ages, and qualifies for the Champions League, and still gets sacked, I mean, chapeau. Just raise a glass to that, just incredible to think that a Spurs manager who wins something and qualifies for the Champions League, albeit through in a way that, is apparently unacceptable, would be amazing. Just amazing.
Friday it's on. Last Sunday, full of sound and fury. Not sure how much it signified, though, because Napoli and Inter remain 1 point apart going into the final round of action. Leaders Napoli this Friday night will host Cagliari, who are down in 14th place. Inter, meanwhile, make the trip to Lake Como to take on, Como. Both these title contenders drew this weekend, leaving things as they were. But James, that doesn't really begin to tell the story of Sunday night.
No, I mean, even though the table still shows that, Napoli are a point ahead of Inter, as was the case going into the weekend just gone, the action that was served up on Sunday night, where all of the games were played simultaneously. So it was one of those nights where, I suppose in old days, people would have little handheld radios clutched to their ears, and instead now people are just looking at their phones more than they usually look at their phones to try and get notifications through, which, if you're an Inter fan at San Siro, impossible to get signal there, so good luck. I mean, for Inter to take the lead in the way that they did and leapfrog Napoli, just as Napoli were going in at half-time at the Ennio Tardini, 0-0, drawing again in a game that I think many people would expect them to win. That was galling. Then Lazio came back against Inter with the soon-to-be 38-year-old Pedro. Pedro's still going. Super sub this season for Lazio. Scored 9 goals. I think only Alexander Sorloth for Atleti has been as incisive as a sub in Europe's top 5 leagues. Inter get back in front again, but no. The VAR sort of pulls back a Jan Bissek handball. Referee goes to the monitor, overrules his decision on the pitch, points to the spot. Pedro, perfect penalty. And the scenes at the Ennio Tardini at that stage, you thought that Napoli had scored. Yeah, the away support at the Tardini, started lighting flares, huge roar, and you thought that would maybe spirit Napoli on to get a goal of their own. But in the meantime, it looked again like Inter were going to get winners because Arnautovic missed the sitter. Then he had a goal disallowed. And while that goal was being disallowed, Napoli won a penalty, or at least thought they'd won a penalty in Parma, only for the VAR to say, no, there was a foul already in the build-up. So, a lot happened for us to basically... we were running to stand still, I think is the U2 lyric. And
is that right?
That's where we were, yeah.
Friday night then, were Inter to draw away at Como and Napoli lose, well then we'd have a playoff final, James. When would that be held? Have they decided now?
This has been a source of some controversy because I think the chief executive of the league suggested that it would be in Rome. Whether that had proper consultation or not, there was an assembly of the league this morning, so I imagine it came up. But there's all sorts of controversy. I mean, Inter, for example, didn't speak to the media last night. They thought some of the refereeing was against them. Didn't really like how Simone Inzaghi was sent off. On Friday, Inzaghi and Conte will not be on the sidelines of those Inter Como and Napoli Cagliari games because both were sent off.
Lovely picture of Inzaghi and the Lazio manager Baroni, who was also sent off, stood next to each other watching the final minutes.
Leaning on the one of the yellow gates that is a partition between the kind of stands and the pitch. Yeah, really nice picture. But if we do get that permutation, James, where we have a playoff, I mean, that would be the first time we've had a playoff that decides a title since 1964 between Inter and Bologna. And a lot of people in my mentions this morning saying, what is Serie A doing, trying to, sort of bringing these games forward. So instead of the games happening on Sunday, as we've mentioned, they're happening on Friday night. Why are they doing that? Well, if it is needed, a title playoff, they have to create some space in the calendar for that to happen, particularly with Inter due to play the Champions League final in Munich against Jules' Paris Saint-Germain. So that is the explanation.
We'll see what happens on Friday then. Once again, Napoli are at home to Cagliari while Inter travelled to Como. So tight beneath those two for the top 4. Atalanta in 3rd place, but then you got Juve, Roma and Lazio, only 2 points apart, those 3, jostling for the final Champions League spot. We heard Lazio, they drew with Inter at San Siro. Juve went to Udinese and won 2-0. Roma took on Milan and ended a rotten week for the Rossoneri by beating them 3-1. The final day fixtures will see Lazio host Lecce, Roma make the trip to Torino, and Juve head to the Lagoon to face a relegation-threatened Venezia. James, what do you think?
Yeah, I mean, it's in Juventus' hands. The battle down at the bottom not to go down is equally compelling if you're kind of interested in that. But, Eusebio Di Francesco is the Venezia coach. He's one of those guys who young players shine under him. His teams play really good football and they shouldn't ever go down. And yet they always get to the final day with the possibility of going down, and they go down, which is what happened with Frosinone last year. And you look at Venezia having to play a Juventus that at least Igor Tudor has made competitive by basically playing their best players in their best positions. So my money is still on Juve somehow. having had a very disappointing season after all the money that they spent. Really embarrassing for them this week that a player that they let go for 15 million and replaced with Lloyd Kelly is now going to Real Madrid in Dean Huijsen. Although not as embarrassing as what's happened at Milan, really, where Milan started the week with Zvone Boban basically going on a YouTube channel and completely destroying the management of the club. You then had them losing to Bologna in the Coppa Italia final. Bologna hadn't won anything since, they hadn't won the Coppa Italia since 1974. And Milan had only beaten them a few days beforehand in the league as well. So, perhaps would be more confident, had also got Leao back for that game, and instead they lost. Didn't really react to going behind. You then had their under-23 team, which they enrolled in the third division, a little bit like the Juventus Next Gen team, which has been doing really well in kind of basically getting young players to make that step up from youth team football to first team football, like Dean Huijsen, like Kenan Yildiz, like Matthias Sule. Milan Futuro, as they're called, Milan Future. First season relegated to the fourth tier. So the futuro is not bright there at Milan, unfortunately.
What did the man who runs everything at Milan have to say about all this, Zlatan Ibrahimovic?
Well, Zlatan was meeting the president of Ireland. I don't know if you saw this.
When was the last time he showed up at Milanello?
To be fair, Zlatan, he was at one of the Milan Futuro games. Nice. Hoping that they wouldn't go down, in part because I think his son, Maximilian, plays for them as well.
Okay.
Milan have got to essentially, I think, find a new coach, find a sporting director, find a soul.
The talk was in the last few days about maybe the man who's just beaten them in the Coppa Italia, Vincenzo Italiano. And we should say well done to Bologna, and particularly Italiano, who had a miserable time in finals till this point. But beating Milan, bringing Bologna their first trophy since 1974, and a great day for Bologna, and a continued resurgence for the Rosso Blu. The other man whose name is being linked is Lee Congerton, actually, and I don't know how much store you set in that, James. It'd be a fascinating appointment.
Well, I mean, Congerton, has experience in Italy. He was working with Atalanta as their kind of head of global, or I suppose, which would be like recruitment outside of Italy. Credited with doing, a good job in a relatively short spell. I don't think Atalanta sign Rasmus Højlund without Lee Congerton and some of the people that he put in place at Atalanta, which after a year they convinced Man United to spend 70 million on a player that they paid 15 or 20 million for from Sturm Graz. Speaks a bit of Italian. I think what's really important for the owner is to have, sort of people that he can have a dialogue with on a day-to-day basis. That's harder with an Italian who doesn't speak much English. It's easier to do it with someone who's international, like Congerton. Milan fans and Milan media would say that's exactly the problem with this club, that it is completely out of touch with the context in which it's working in, which is out of context with itself, out of touch with itself in terms of what Milan is and what Milan should be, and also out of touch with the local ecosystem, which, football is a sport with the same dimensions, the same rules as the Premier League, La Liga, but, Serie A is a different jungle, James, as you well know.
If you're looking to go with somebody who understands that, who has experience, has a good eye for players and speaks the lingo, I know who I'd appoint, James von Grosser. But hey, that's just me. One other big story since we last spoke, and that is Sampdoria, James. Sampdoria in the third division. We had some hopes.
Are they or are they not?
Yeah. Late development.
Dramatic. James, whilst you were sleeping
or on a plane
in Sacramento, dramatic news featuring one of our favourite people. I say favourite people in Italian football, someone who is still around, improbably, and that is Brescia's president, Massimo Cellino, whose accounts were sent to the taxman in Italy. We're talking about Brescia's accounts, the club. And they were like, hang on a minute. A few irregularities here. We don't like what we see. Late payments, that's what the allegations are. So they sent these accounts to the Covisoc, the kind of supervisory body of football in Italy. They were sent to Serie B, the second division, and said, guys, I think you need to open an investigation into this, and that might lead to Brescia having a 4-point penalty. Now, if Brescia were to get a 4-point penalty, what that would mean is that, there was supposed to be a relegation playout tonight between Frosinone and Salernitana. That has been cancelled, pending a hearing on Thursday, where basically the Serie B will decide whether to impose this 4-point penalty on Brescia. If they do, and Brescia can appeal, what will happen is that Brescia will be relegated in the event of a definitive judgment saying 4-point penalty, sorry, you've made mistakes here. Frosinone will survive, and Salernitana will play Sampdoria in a relegation playout to survive in the second division.
Next up, let's move on to the team that didn't wrap up the title. Oh no, Ajax.
Oh, Jordan.
Final day of the Eredivisie, and history made this weekend in the Netherlands. A month ago, with just 5 games to go, Ajax were 9 points clear of PSV. This weekend, though, it was PSV who celebrated the title thanks to a 6th straight victory. Ajax becoming the first team in the history of the top 6 European leagues, England, Italy, Spain, France, Germany and the Netherlands, to throw away a lead of 9 points with just 5 games remaining. Crikey, Michiel Jongsma joins us now. Michiel, we previewed this last week with a little bit of disbelief, and lo and behold, it has come to pass. What are people talking about there in the Netherlands? Is it the Ajax collapse, or is it about PSV's 6th straight win comeback?
It's been very much about the Ajax collapse, although I do think it's slightly unfair given the streak that PSV had to put together to eventually win the title. But after the festivities starting yesterday in Eindhoven, although it got a bit dicey at one point because it took a while for PSV to score their opening goal. And in the end, they did it seconds after Ajax had taken the lead against Twente. And Sparta did fight back to make it a draw for about 10-15 minutes, I think. So there was some late excitement, but in the end, it was a PSV win, and that was what it was all about yesterday. But the dynamic has shifted a bit since.
That Ajax goal from Jordan Henderson is first for the club, which I think there's a 6-minute spell when that was going to be the title-winning goal.
Yeah, and that would have been quite something because it was his first goal since, I think it was with Liverpool against Everton in 2021, so it had been a while for him.
Dramatic scenes post-game for Ajax and their manager, Francesco Farioli, who was in floods of tears as the team saluted the fans, who were pretty magnanimous in their appreciation of what in many ways is a pretty fine season for Ajax. 5th in the previous campaign, 2nd this time around. But after Wout Weghorst had slammed a camera away for trying to film him during this aftermath of the game, Farioli subsequently announced he's quitting from Ajax. So what does this give a window, Michiel, into why there's been this late season collapse of Ajax? And what's the reaction been to his decision?
We kind of touched upon it before. This Ajax team was never meant to challenge for the title. The goal at the beginning of the season for them was to finish in the top 3 because this was the first time in a while that would actually get you to the Champions League preliminaries. So that was the goal because Feyenoord and PSV last season were miles ahead of Ajax. And Farioli, to make things even more difficult, lost Steven Bergwijn, a few other players, and didn't really get anything in return for it. And Ajax are known for their beautiful football. It's Cruyffian, it's attacking, and as Julian can probably attest to, Farioli at Nice wasn't the most exciting manager out there, and that's what he brought to Ajax as well. Just a steely, resilient, defensively sound type of football that would get more out of the squad than probably any manager would at this point, but not the type of football that would get the crowd cheering and everything. And I think that this season there was a really understanding from the fans that this was the best that they could hope for at this point, but things went so well in the end that I think the realistic expectations of this team and what it actually had become was quite divergent actually in how it was perceived, and that has led to the Ajax board constantly pushing for that typical "we are the best, we are the prettiest" to an extent as well, and we deserve fantastic football, with Farioli preaching like, well, I need different players to make that kind of thing happen. I need more investment as well. I need more experience. Not that this squad was void of experience, but I need better experience, so to speak, rather than a few 30-plus-year-olds at the end of their career, to make that dream happen. And in the end, for Farioli, he felt like he could not really meet the expectations that were going to be set out for next season. And in the end, it was his decision to quit. But I think one very much instigated by the demands of what it is to be an Ajax manager.
If you sacrifice your playing style to get results, but then manage to produce the worst collapse in the history of European football, it's kind of a bitter pill to swallow.
It definitely is, and I mean, we haven't really touched upon the collapse itself, but it came in the 99th minute, 9 minutes into injury time, with FC Groningen 2-1 behind with 10 men because they had received a red card. It looked like they had pulled through, and in the end they conceded from a set piece, and yeah, it was just. You could tell after that game already, like the players were fully aware that they had thrown it away at that point. It got really rowdy as well. Wout Weghorst storming off the pitch in tears as well. I don't think anyone has cried more than Wout Weghorst over the last 5 days, including Farioli, so that probably tells you plenty. It's been a rough period for Weghorst, because he's never won I think he's never won a trophy, which is quite remarkable given the teams that he's played for. But yeah, I mean, Ajax threw it away, and in the end, Farioli was quite reflective, saying, well, we've qualified for Champions League football, and given what we expected from this season, that is already quite an achievement. And I fully agree with that. I think no one expected Ajax at the beginning of the season to move past Twente, AZ, and Feyenoord into a second spot. But it doesn't look good when you drop, 10 points in the last 5 games, does it? So
indeed not. The last Ajax manager to manage a bottle anything like that big, of course, was the 2019 team that blew up in the Champions League semi-finals against Spurs. I don't know, whatever happened to that manager.
He might get a chance to do it again. So, I mean, talking about succession at Ajax at this point,
yeah,
maybe you should give it a go as well, Jimbo, because the record for bald managers in this league is ridiculous. There has not. Philip Cocu in 2018 was the last manager with a full set of hair to win the Eredivisie.
Is that right?
Yeah. It's been
7 years.
Yeah, it's been Ten Hag, it's been Slot, Bosz now twice. Yeah, so.
So is that why Farioli didn't win, Michiel? Farioli has such a great head of hair and beard.
I think that's the difference between what the club wanted him to do and what he wanted to do as well. Right. They said you have to shave your head bald, Francesco, otherwise you will not win this title, and he refused. And that's
I mean, it's DNA, it's football tradition.
It's Italian as well. Italians can't shave their heads. You know, they're beautiful hair.
What are you talking about, Jules? They are the European leaders in shaven heads.
Well, also in hair transplant.
Is that right?
But it is funny that Ajax now target Erik ten Hag as one of the candidates for the job, and the other one is Paul Simonis, who's the manager of Go Ahead Eagles. And I guess I don't have to tell you what he looks like, but he has been really successful this season, winning the first major trophy for Go Ahead Eagles with the Dutch Cup. So I mean. It is weird that they're going that direction, and I think it's a bit of a risk as well.
Bold direction.
I don't think the squad is good enough to play the expansive kind of football that Ajax associates themselves with. But we'll see how that all pans out.
Michiel, what would you say the proportion of bald people do? You know, men with hair in the Netherlands is. I'm just asking because, say for example, in Italy,
asking for a friend,
it feels a higher proportion of bald men. So the fact that only bald managers win the title would make sense there. But in the Netherlands, I mean, you've got a fantastic head of hair. What's the kind of normal? You walk down the street, you're going to see a lot of bald people?
No.
Or is it a real outlier?
I actually don't think so. But given like the proportion of, I think it's very like job specific. Like, I don't think I will ever be considered a good football manager because I don't have the right hairdo for it. Because like when you look, it's PSV. Well, Ajax is still up in the air. You have Robin van Persie now, of course, who has a great set of hair. Roland Jans at Utrecht is kind of in between. But like, you have Joseph Oosting at Twente, you have Simonis at Go Ahead Eagles, you have Dick Lukien at FC Groningen. Like, there are just so many bald managers in this league. It's an obsession.
But in the Premier League, you have Slots, then you have Guardiola, Firmino.
Yeah.
And then Klopp doesn't count because Klopp is a hair transplant.
Yeah.
Conte doesn't count because Conte is a hair. So, what is Jose the last Premier League coach with a full set of hair? You know, his last Chelsea title, is that the last
2014, something like that.
Yeah. Wow.
So in my list here of the most bald people in the world, Spain first, 44%, Italy second, 44%,
Ooh.
France third, 44%, US fourth, and Germany fifth. And to find Mikel's and his family and all his friends, I need to go down to maybe 30 something, because I can't count them all, but you're here. So in the Netherlands, 33% of bald men in the Netherlands are bald.
Why do we think, what is it about the environment in Holland or diet in Holland or genetic makeup of the Dutch
You and I are
people
both interested in this answer, James.
Yeah. Which
I don't know if there's a correlation between us being quite a tall nation as well. Julien has the answer to how the Scandinavian countries are ranking, because that might be a reason. Yeah, it is fascinating.
UK is 12th. So Jimbo,
do you ever get held, James? Since people say, "Are you from the Netherlands?" Because you have so much hair still. So
for now,
yeah. Whereas, Michiel, if I walk through a mix zone in the Eredivisie, look out. Michiel, that's fantastic. Thank you so much for bringing us all of that and the news about Ajax. And well done to PSV. And look forward to hearing who Ajax bring in and all sorts of other stories. We'll catch up with you soon. For now, many, many thanks.
Have a great day, guys.
This episode of the Totally Football Show European Edition is brought to you by Fedex. Fedex is an official sponsor of the Champions League. As a trusted global logistics service provider for businesses around the world, Fedex are looking to shine a light on the innovative small and medium-sized businesses working in the football industry that have shaped the game today and are contributing to a thriving future. We call these the Fedex Champions of Business. These businesses have grown themselves while also building a foundation for success for today's clubs and star players, whether that be at grassroots levels, through performance and analytics, or the development of the fan experience, to name just a few. Go to fedex.com/champions for inspiring stories of businesses in football. That's fedex.com/champions.
Jules, Ligue, final day of the season there. I see that Paris Saint-Germain finished 19 points clear of Marseille following a last day 3-1 win over Auxerre. Has there been some talk of bringing in a playoff for France as well?
Yeah, that's right. It's a thing that has been mentioned. There would be a big overhaul of how the league is being governed in France. They want to create follow the example of the Premier League, for example, to have the league being run by the 18 clubs now, 20 in the Premier League, but 18 in France, where they all have a vote and you vote for some decisions, so you don't have a CEO like is the case now. So they think about that. They think about playoffs, maybe for the winners, like they've started to do in the women's game. So Lyon and PSG were the playoff final to win the title this season, despite Lyon walking the regular season, if you want. And Lyon won that too. So this is one of the ideas. Also, they want to bring back the League Cup, but only for the clubs who are not in Europe, who play outside of the European competition. So there's a few ideas like that to try to make it a bit more interesting. Although this was a very, very good season on on many, many levels for Liga.
Okay, and all sorts of reasons why next season could be really interesting as well, as we touched on before with Paris FC coming up. This final day of this campaign, though, did see some things decided, particularly places in Europe. Nice holding on to 4th place and thus the Champions League qualifying spot with a 6-0 win over Brest in one of our favourite fixtures. So that caps off a really good season for Nice.
Incredible. I mean, in Europe, they were terrible. I think they finished 35th out of 36 teams in the Europa League, but they were great in the league. It's their second highest points total. I think the highest goal scoring in a season. And it's a shame that the owner doesn't care about them. Obviously, as he publicly says quite regularly, Nice are not good enough and Ligue 1 are not good enough. I'm sure that watching Manchester United and what they do in their league is much better than watching your other team that finished 4th and was actually good and played good football. The problem, again, for Nice is they will sell their best players in the summer, especially Evan Guessant, who is very good for them. I think it's 12 goals or 13 goals and 9 assists in the league for him. He will probably come here to England and rightly so, because he's got all the attribute to be very good in the Premier League. So they will have to not start from scratch next season and go through the qualifiers of the Champions League, because their season will start very early on August 3rd or 4th with the first leg of their first round of qualifiers. But it's a great achievement for Frank Hayes on his first season to have qualified the team for that top 4.
Lyon, meantime, qualified for the Conference League, or did they, Jules?
Good question, Jimbo. They did on the pitch, and we mentioned Lacazette earlier. They won that game at home against Angers 2-0, 2-0 with the 2 goals that he scored. Ryan Cherki also celebrating his last game for his club, where he also went through the academy and was born there. And now I'm not sure where he's going to go. If he's ready for top English clubs, he's going to go to Germany first, maybe, or even to PSG. But he will leave for sure. And they earned that place. The problem is, as we've been saying before, their accounts are terrible. They're losing a lot of money. They need to find a lot of money, whether through selling their best players like Cherki, like Malik Fofana. But it's not the money from the Europa League that's going to help them really right now. So UEFA have already said, if you don't get more money in, then you won't be allowed to play in Europe next season. And let's not forget, they also right now are in the 2nd division next season. They've already been relegated because their accounts are so bad. So the next few weeks will be very important for John Textor, our friend John Textor, who missed the game on Saturday evening at Lyon because he was at Wembley for the FA Cup final with Crystal Palace, of course, where he owns 45% of the shares. And by the time he made it to Lyon, it was literally the end of the celebration.
Nice that he made the effort anyway. The game of the weekend, Jules, was it the match which involved both Europe and the relegation battle in Ligue? Strasbourg taking on Le Havre. What an incredible moment. Relegation threatened Le Havre. In the 99th minute, awarded a penalty. And what happens next?
And they scored Abdoulaye Touré with a panenka to score the winning goal for Le Havre. That means...
He panenkas it. 99th minute. A goal to keep them up, and he decides to panenka it.
He scored one already earlier in the game, and maybe he thought, he's never going to expect me to do panenka now, not with so much at stake, because with that win, Le Havre went just outside of the bottom 3, which means they avoid the playoff position for relegation and promotion with the Ligue 2 team, Metz, which would be Reims now, and Reims will have to play the first leg before their cup semi-final. On Wednesday is the first leg, then they have the cup final against PSG at the Stade de France, then the second leg. So it's fair to say that the priority is not at all on the French Cup final. But for Strasbourg, it's heartbreaking, really. And I think we all feel a bit sad for Liam Rosinho and all this young team that did so well for the whole season, just ran a little bit of gas towards the end. They were without their best player, Emmanuel Emega, for this game, which is a massive blow for them, and just came short a little bit of automatic qualification for Europe, because if PSG win the French Cup, then they will be able to go into the Conference League qualifiers.
2-1 for Lille against Reims, which was Jonathan David's last game for Lille.
Yeah.
And also, Will Still announced that he is leaving Lens.
Yeah, for Jonathan David, he's been great, really, in Ligue 1. We've said that many times before. Is he ready for a top European club, whether that's in England or in Italy, which seems to be the 2 markets that are the keenest right now? And there's a few of those clubs that are already discussing with him and his agent the possibility of him arriving as a free agent. I think he's at his age, with all the goals that he scored in France, doing it also in the Champions League this season. Let's not forget how good he's been in the Champions League this season for them. I'm still not completely sure he's fully ready for like a top club in England or in Italy. But I think it's because there's no transfer fee to pay. I think it's a risk. I mean, risk might be a bit strong, but you go for him. You go for him. He's a great guy to have in your dressing room. There's a lot of things that he can do on a pitch. His all-around game is great. It's just, let's see if he can. It's just a question of stepping up, really. And he might do it straight away. And like a Marcus Thuram, for example, I don't think it was easy for Thuram to come from Gladbach to go to Inter and have this kind of impact. And I think for Jonathan David, it's a little bit the same. So let's see what he does. But whoever signs him, he's a great guy to have in your squad, whether he's ready to be a starter and score 25 goals in one of those two leagues that we mentioned. I'm not sure yet. But yeah, I think it's a no-brainer. And for Will Steele, he still had 2 years left on his contract. I don't think Lens really expected him to announce it in that way. But we know his girlfriend is not well in England. He wants to get close. He wants to get closer to her. Obviously, come back to England. I think it was always his dream to coach in England. There were talks with Southampton. Ideally, he would want a Premier League club, of course. But I think he might be happy to settle for a championship club with a big project and a lot of ambitions to go back straight into the Premier League and then for him to be a Premier League manager. So this is one to follow quite closely. But he did well at Lens, considering the situation. They sold a lot of his key players, not really replaced. He had a lot of young players. They were a bit up and down. But in the end, it's a decent season, and they would have been very happy to continue with him and build on this season that just finished. They will have to find somebody else. I mean, Pierre Sage, our friend, Stonewise is mentioned a lot, which is a possibility. But yeah, it's a little bit of a shame that he could not continue there.
Best wishes to him and to Emma Saunders. And Julian, anything else from Ligue 1?
Just briefly on Marseille, because they've made it to they finished second. They made it to the Champions League. We knew that. Mason Greenwood scored 2 goals. We're not really sure exactly what will happen to Roberto De Zerbi because he seems to be a little bit vague about his future. He still has 2 years left on his contract. They also unveiled the long-awaited statue for Bernard Tapie, just outside of the Stade Vélodrome, which is obviously a bit controversial when you know the life and the merits of Bernard Tapie in general, not just, what Marseille won with him, but maybe how they won with him, some games, some trophies. But he's a club legend. So personally, I've got no issue with them having a statue of maybe one of the most important figure in their history, long and beautiful history. For other people in France, it seemed to have been a bit of a problem. But hey, they've got a statue. It's quite a big one. Him on the shoulders of some of his players when they won the Champions League back in 1993. So the team won after that and finished second. Is where they should be, but still, as we said last week, it's a big achievement still.
Paul Ballou's joining us, everybody. Paul, Spain, a nation agog for Wednesday's match in Bilbao, of course. What's the buzz there about this clash of Spurs and Man United?
There's a genuine buzz. I think that, yeah.
Is there?
Yeah. I think that there was a sense of, I don't want to say the word being afraid of all the English fellas that are going to land into the city in the next hours, but a bit of that. But yeah, at the end of the day, waiting for this week's match. There's a bit of like disappointment for the fact that they don't have Athletic in there, which was the big dream people on the city had since last summer. But yeah, I'm sure Bilbao is not going to be a boring place to be over the next few days.
You're going to Bilbao, Paul, at the weekend because Barca are playing there, or just because you're...
Yeah, that's a good shout, because Barca are playing there in the last game in La Liga.
Barcelona, who, since our last conversation, Paul, have sealed the title. They did it at Espanyol. Espanyol did turn the sprinklers on the pitch. And then this weekend, lost 3-2 to Villarreal, but it didn't really matter anyway because they are champions or campions.
Exactly, campions. It's been a streak of 4 days of hangover here in Barcelona. The players, basically everyone, went out on Thursday when Lamine Yamal scored this worldly of a corner to seal the title, and it's been going on until then. I think that, yeah, if we would have done blood tests to all the Barca players who played against Villarreal, I'm sure that we could have found traces of alcohol in there. But yeah, somehow they still managed to perform quite well. They were a bit sloppy in defense, but everyone who was in Montjuic on the weekend was not just there to watch the game, but to watch the celebrations that were about to come after the game, because Barca were given the title, they lifted the trophy, they had the celebration with this lap of honor, all the players celebrating, pictures and all this sort of stuff that everyone was really relishing for here in Barcelona.
Paul, did you invite them back to your place? Because I mean, it's a blank canvas. There's no furniture, white walls. I mean, it feels like a great place to have a house party where you can have a great night and then just, redecorate.
And it looked like a good place to kidnap someone as well and just to keep them hostage.
Are they treating you well, Paul?
Yeah. If if I blink 3 times in a row, please understand
we come
the
to
message.
rescue you.
Let's have a quick word about Barcelona's friends, Real Madrid, who've already got their rebuild underway.
Exactly. Dean Huijsen is on the way. Xavi Alonso will be on the way. Trent Alexander-Arnold will be on the way. Real Madrid is starting to work on possibly what they should have worked for the last couple of years, and they didn't. And which is an explanation of the results this season. These last games of La Liga, since they lost at the Clásico, basically Real Madrid, they shifted their minds to the Club World Cup in summer. It's the next target that they have and the next trophy that they can win. So, in the last couple of games, Vinicius has not played. A lot of academy players have been granted with minutes in La Liga. Even though with that they managed to win against Sevilla over in the weekend. But Real Madrid pretty much looking towards the next season. As we said, Dean Huijsen, Trent Alexander-Arnold, and expect more names to come in. They're looking for a new left back as well. And let's see which are the wishes that like Xavi Alonso has when he comes in.
What about the manager? When are they going to announce that?
This is a good question. But I think it's a matter of days. It's just a matter of days. Let's see when Real Madrid think that it's the right time. But now I think that La Liga is going to end over the next weekend. Ancelotti will leave. And that this will be the perfect timing for announce the arrival of Xavi Alonso.
Xavi Alonso, indeed. And next weekend we'll also find out who'll be leaving La Liga through the relegation. Las Palmas are down now, sadly for Oli McBurney and company, along with Valladolid. And who else might be joining them?
So there's a couple of candidates. It's all about Leganés or Espanyol. Right now, Espanyol is 2 points ahead of them. But in the final week, they both play against the two sides that have been relegated. So Espanyol are hosting Las Palmas at home and Leganés are playing against Valladolid. Basically, Espanyol has like the strong hand in here. If they win the game against an already relegated Las Palmas at home, this is done. And Leganés, they just have to pray for a miracle to happen here. So that's pretty much the only thing that's left in like Spanish football. Possibly the team that goes to the Conference League is still a dispute between Rayo Vallecano and Osasuna. Both teams can go there, but it's going to be Athletic Club, the Bilbao and Villarreal in the Champions League. Betis is going to be Europa League, and then this Conference League spot is still at stake between two teams that are going to be quite appealing to see in European football next season.
Paul, that's lovely stuff. We'll catch up with you again next week then to find out how it all pans out.
It's been a pleasure.
Seb Stafford-Bloor. Seb, we've only got you for a limited time because you're off to a party.
I sure am. I can't believe I'm going to say this. I'm going to go and watch Hamburg celebrate being promoted with 120,000 other people in the city centre as well.
Wow.
Never thought this day would come. 7 years in the waiting.
Well, it's probably going to be quite a party if their pitch invasion last week was anything to go by. By the way, any news on the fan who was very unwell afterwards?
No official updates, which I think in this case is probably good news, Jimbo. And I think everybody who was admitted to hospital that night too has been released, and everybody's okay. No official word on the fan who had life-threatening injuries though at the moment.
Okay. Well, the big news this weekend in the Bundesliga on the final round of matches was that Dortmund did it. A 3-0 victory over Holstein Kiel means that they secure fourth place in Champions League football again next season. How remarkable a comeback was this from the team from whom you least expected it?
Yeah, worth remembering that when Niko Kovac took over at the beginning of February, Dortmund were in 11th, and actually this season dropped as low as 12th in the Bundesliga. And this creates quite an interesting situation. I mean, they won 7 of their last 8 games. Their last loss was against RB Leipzig in the middle of March. I was at that game and I remember thinking now, if you told me then that Leipzig would be the ones who missed out on European football altogether and Dortmund would sneak in the Champions League, would not have taken that bet for any money in the world. But here we are. And it is an interesting situation because when Kovac was appointed, obviously he has an 18-month contract. It was seen very much as not an interim appointment, but a kind of a needs-must situation where make the team tougher, make it stronger, make us competent and see what we can get out of the teams above us who are a little bit dysfunctional, who are not taking opportunities as they might have done. Kovac has been so convincing that Dortmund really have no choice now but to kind of put a few pieces around him in the summer. Lars Ricken, the CEO for Sport, at the weekend said, a little bit of hyperbole here, but said, this is the greatest managerial spell I've ever known at Borussia Dortmund, which if you're Jurgen Klopp, you probably want a word. Maybe Thomas Tuchel does too. But it's a pretty strong endorsement. And, the elephant in the room is that Kovac's style of coaching, style of football, is very different to what Dortmund would consider the house style to be. So how far do you go there in creating a team for him versus the team that Borussia Dortmund fans, more traditionalists perhaps, would like to see? So interesting situation over the summer, especially because they are in need of a big, big rebuild. So they're going to have to go in one direction or the other.
Jurgen Klopp, if he's having words, he might want to have one or two with the folks at his RB Leipzig, who, as you say, didn't just miss out on Champions League, but missed out on all European football after slipping to 7th.
Yeah, won't even be playing in the Conference League next season, James. Mainz beat them to the punch there. I think, and Jules brought this up a couple of weeks ago, I think given the players there, forgetting the coaching situation, because Marco Rose paid for his underperformance with his job, he was sacked. And yes, there needs to be a conversation about the model, the recruiting, the style of play at RB Leipzig. Those are all valid discussions. At the same time, some of those players need to have a little bit of a look in the mirror over the summer, I think, because some of the performances and some of the fragility they've shown, emotionally in particular, it has been completely unacceptable. And if your point of being at RB Leipzig is to kind of advertise yourself for a role higher up the game, it's not very flattering for some of these players. And yes, they've had injuries, a couple of bad ones, but there is just no way, given their budget versus Mainz's budget, which is kind of 3rd in the Bundesliga versus 11th in the Bundesliga, there's just no way this should be happening. Credit to Mainz and Bo Henriksen. He's done a wonderful job in the space of a season, taking them from the door of the Zweite Bundesliga, really, to at one point they might have qualified for the Champions League. Fell off a little bit, but this is a wonderful success for them and for him, and a great endorsement of his coaching. But Leipzig, that is going to be a rough old summer, and I expect a lot of change there, rightly so, because it's just, it can't be allowed to, you can't just pin this to Marco Rose, and you can't just always make the excuse, well, they're young players and, they're going to struggle in situations, they can't control games. Eventually you have to act on that, and some of these players have to pay a price for it, really.
Someone's going to get canned in the Red Bull organization, I see. Frankfurt did make the Champions League after what's been a season of 1 or 2 changes for them. Of course, Omar Marmoush leaving in January and possibly more big names to go. Or will the fact that they're in Europe's top tier cup competition, will that guarantee them a little bit of extra budget and keep the likes of Ekitike?
Well, it will guarantee them a bit of extra budget, but I still think the decisions they make recruiting-wise will be the decisions they've planned to make. That's the way that Eintracht operates. So when a player reaches a point at which they think that, the Bundesliga doesn't serve the development any further, as with Marmoush in January, they thought he's not going to get any better. This is the sort of the apex of his value. He's going to be sold now. I still think that will be the same. And so they will make decisions based on that analysis rather than contending for the Champions League. Did you see the celebrations afterwards? A few of these videos have crept out onto social media. So Eintracht needed to win or draw in Freiburg to qualify for the Champions League. Got their win, came from behind to win 3-1. Were making their way back on the team coach between Freiburg and Frankfurt, and somewhere at an Autobahn rest stop, the coach pulled up. Out came all the players into the kind of the convenience stores on the forecourts, and just kind of invaded the rest stop. And so if you were a kind of a motorist having a little casual drive on a Saturday afternoon or Saturday early evening, and then all of a sudden these Bundesliga players came sort of pouring out, a bit of Bob Marley coming out of the coach too. His music, not Bob Marley himself, of course.
I mean, that would be a surprise.
That would have been something from Frankfurt.
That would have been more surprising than Eintracht Frankfurt players sort of invading a forecourt. That would have been.
No, I'm glad you.
That would have been the front page of Bild, right?
No, really.
That's very fair. Wow. Well, I mean, if you look in the phone book, there are a lot of Bob Marleys out there. I'm just saying.
If you can find the footage, do, because there's Rasmus Christensen wearing a scarf as bandana. There's Ugo Ekitike with what looks like a giant cuddly fox under one arm.
Bob Marley.
Success allows you to do a lot of things, Jimbo. It's fair enough.
Wonderful scenes at that motorway stop there, Seb. Lovely to see Harry Kane adding another goal to his tally in Bayern's final game, a 4-0 win at Hoffenheim. They finish 13 points clear of Leverkusen in the end, do the Bavarians, and Harry wins the Golden Boot in each of his first 2 seasons in the Bundesliga. Boom.
I mean, it's pretty remarkable. I think one of the things about that is that, yes, it's unprecedented, the first time it's happened for a new player, but it's kind of one in the eye for all the critics that have sort of endlessly commentated on, what kind of goals is he scoring, who's he scoring those goals against. It's been hasn't been a lot of charity towards Harry Kane, so this is going to be a sweet moment for him. Harry Kane, who looked a little bit green around the gills on Saturday afternoon with a couple of those other teammates because they had a few days in Ibiza midweek. And actually, that was a little bit of a controversy. It's Bayern Munich, so there must always be something to talk about. There must always be an angry column to write for someone. And people said, well, at the time, Hoffenheim was still technically relevant to the relegation places. Not really, because goal difference, etc. And people got a little bit bent out of shape by a couple of Bayern players having a sort of a midweek holiday to celebrate their Bundesliga title. A little bit joyless, but he came on and scored, so you can't really argue. And also, I suppose the headline for the day, Thomas Müller's last hour for Bayern Munich in the Bundesliga came off to a lovely reception, and it was in Heidenheim, Instant so not just obviously from the Bayern curve, from the visitors in the guest block, but the whole stadium, quite rightly, because Thomas Müller is Thomas Müller, of course, and lovely to see. And then, again, all sorts of fun in Marienplatz in Munich over the weekend too, with the players coming out on the balcony to see their fans and everything. And so it's a wonderful moment for Kane, but also very touching for Thomas Müller, because actually you don't get that kind of situation very often. We've talked about it a little bit before, but you don't get the homegrown player who wins absolutely everything available to him, remains loyal to one club, and manages to exist at that level of the game for so long. And then kind of doesn't quite go out on his terms. We've covered that before too, because he wanted to stay and he made no secret of that. But very touching to see the Bayern fans say goodbye to him, and it's very sincere in this kind of age of like slightly confected emotional responses. This is very sincere and very lovely. And it's just an amazing career, Thomas Müller. Raising combination between Thomas Müller and Bayern Munich, and just the whole story has just been wonderful to watch unfold.
Seb, as good as Kane has been, your Bayern player of the season would be Michael Olise?
Oh, by far. Jules, I think one of the things about Olise is obviously everybody knew that he was talented. Crystal Palace fans will have known that for a long time, of course, but there is a big difference between being an outstanding Crystal Palace player and being an outstanding Bayern Munich player. Even just systemically, like you go from being someone who plays largely on the counter, not so much on the Glasner, but still a transitional player, to a front foot player who's facing deep block after deep block, week after week. And what's really been interesting to me is whenever Bayern have needed for something from Olise, he's produced it. So you've gone from not just player who's capable of performing, but player who's capable at times of putting Bayern Munich on his shoulders. And if you think back, Jules, to June, when he had his introductory press conference and the world had their fun with him a little bit because of some of his monosyllabic terse responses, and the feeling maybe that those lights were going to be a little bit bright for him, to the response that he's produced over the last 9 months. Amazing. And I watched a lot of Michael Olise before he got here, but even I've been surprised. I think he's a better player than I appreciated, and I think that goes for a lot of people too. And I know the transfer fee Bayern paid for him is contextually a lot of money for German football. Even for Bayern Munich, that looks like a steal now compared to what 55 million euros will buy you elsewhere. Just a great success story for him and for the club.
Magnificent. So with the Bundesliga now wrapped up, does all of Germany turn its attention to the Europa League final on Wednesday?
Yeah, really enraptured by the prospect of the two worst teams in the Premier League not to be relegated. There was a little bit of bite back from not just Eintracht Frankfurt fans, but some of the media who kind of, a little bit critical of the fact that this Tottenham could get this far in the tournament, and in the abstract, what it said about English football's commercial and financial advantages, which I think has a there's some merit in that argument. And it's not a captivating final if you're not a supporter of one of those teams. But no, I think they'll give that a miss. And don't know whether they'll move straight on to the Club World Cup, because there are a couple of Bayern Munich and Borussia Dortmund games which are happening at 3:00 German time, which don't know who scheduled that. But I don't.
3:00 in the morning.
Yeah, 3:00 in the morning. So I'm not sure what the country makes of that yet, or the tournament itself. But I suppose they're not alone in that, because you can't just because you describe a tournament as being iconic doesn't necessarily make it so, does it? So let's see.
Tell you what was iconic though is the German Cup final on Saturday. My boy Maël Corboz and Armina Bielefeld.
Yeah, I had some time. I got to spend some time with Michael Corboz last week.
I love him.
Got to go meet him. He's just a wonderful human being. I've got an article coming out in a couple of days with him, but I don't think I'm stealing its thunder by saying that. Just a very different professional footballer.
Yeah.
He's a very, very good player. He's been toiling away in Europe for nearly a decade now. Born in Alabama, raised in New Jersey, came over, was plugging away in the Dritte Didn't quite make it the first time, came back via a spell in the Dutch second division, and now he's leading his club into the German Cup final. But he's an amazing human being. I mean, when he's not playing football, he's not a gamer. He's not that kind of guy. He runs his own sustainability consultancy in his spare time, between captaining a third division side who have just won promotion as champions, by the way. When he's not doing that, when he's not being a husband and a father, he's running his own sustainability company. He's a delight. He really is. And goodness, wish him and his teammates all the best against Stuttgart on Saturday, of course.
What are the odds, Seb?
Haven't looked them up. Dare not look them up.
No, but I mean, generally speaking, what are their chances?
4 Bundesliga teams already, right? So they can do it again.
They won 5 games to get here. All 5 of those teams were in divisions above them. 4 of those teams were in the Bundesliga. They're going to win. Like, I'm not saying they are going to win, but they are going to Berlin to win. There's no inferiority. And I think one of the interesting things about Arminia Bielefeld's run is that they haven't played as an underdog. They haven't just sat in their box, hoped for the best, packed 11 players behind the ball and just, hoped not to get broken down. They've played a really, really, really smart game every single round, and it's been different. Their style of play has been adapted around whoever they've played against. Michiel Net he deserves an awful lot of credit for his for his game planning. When I went to visit Maël, I got to meet one of the analysts there, who was already doing his work on Stuttgart, and he said he'd been there since 7:00 that morning. He was staying until 6:00 that night, and then afterwards he was going to go and play amateur football for his own team that evening. So it's kind of an obsessive approach, but look at sort of the way that they were able to exploit weaknesses against Werder Bremen. Yes, Leverkusen, but the games against Union Berlin, against Werder Bremen, against Freiburg, just as impressive. They're there on merit, not because of some weird quirk in the kind of the football compendium. And I give them a very good chance of beating Stuttgart. Very good chance.
It's been that kind of season when underdogs can win trophies. And hey, maybe even Spurs could on Wednesday. We shall see.
No, let's not do that. No, I'm protecting myself with a kind of, not even just a veneer, a generally negative attitude towards it. And then I can't be hurt again, Jimbo.
That's what you think, Seb?
No, well, last time Spurs won a trophy, I had a full head of hair. So
Bob Marley was probably still alive.
Bob Marley was knocking around in a service station between Freiburg and Frankfurt.
Running that petrol station.
Yeah. Seb, thank you so much for joining us today. And we'll hear what happens to Arminia Bielefeld next week.
We sure will, yeah.
That's the state of play around Europe. Many thanks to Seb and Paul Balouse and Michiel Jongsma earlier on. And Julian Laurence and James Horncastle too. Thanks to producer Lucy there. And you listener, do catch up with us again in a week when we'll round up even more stuff and look ahead, of course, to the Champions League final. For now, from all of us here, it's goodbye.
The Totally Football Show podcast is available 3 times a week, bringing you all the football news you could reasonably be expected to care about. We've got views, we've got stats, we've got analysis, we've got some of the best football writers around, and the whole thing is absolutely free. So have a listen on Spotify or Apple Podcasts or all the usual places by clicking on the link below.